Afternoon, everybody, and we're here today in a very interesting panel. We've got a United Nations of successful producer-directors, okay, and a lot of them probably don't need any introduction whatsoever, but first let me just run through and just introduce them very briefly. Jack Neo, to my left. Jack is a native of Singapore, and one of the most prominent film producer-directors here in Singapore, with a string of successful hits to his name. Most recently, Our Boys to Men, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what he's been doing and the challenges he faces. And next to Jack, I want to introduce you to Banjong. As you know, Banjong has been in the business for a number of years. Obviously, he's very well known for his very successful film as a director of PMUK and Shutter. And Banjong, as you know, is from Thailand, and we're going to have some time with him to also discuss his films, okay? And the next, Maya, okay? Maya's from Indonesia, okay? And Maya was the producer of The Raid, okay? And as well as Merantau and a number of other films that you've worked with Gareth over the years. And we're also going to talk to our friend next to Maya, Mr. Kim. Okay, so Mr. Kim is the CEO of Fineworks from Korea. And a very notable piece most recently that they produced is a film called Miracle in Cell Number 7, and which we'll talk about that as well. Now, I think what we'll do first is that I'm not sure if all of you are very familiar with the films and the most recent films that they produced, which are all, you know, box office hits in their own right. So I think as reference points, what we should be doing is we should just be playing trailers of each of their movies, and so there's a reference point to them. So is audio visual ready? I think what we'll do is that we'll start with Jack's film. Okay, so this is a trailer of Jack's most recent film.
Training to be soldiers, fight for our land. Lost in our lives, 2 years of our time. Have you ever wondered why must we we love our land, we want it to be free. Hey, come on, faster, faster!
Gentlemen, this prosperous nation is not by chance. It is because of what you are wearing right now. One leg, one love. One leg, one love.
You should give each boy one maid, so we as parents are not so worried, you know. 你跟那个公 camp 讲哦，看看可不可以 upgrade 我们的 camp 去 single room。President 要不要 ？What?
I want to go overseas and study with my girlfriend. Hey, army, I'm not ready.
Not ready. 去当兵慢慢就会 ready.
You need to show your leadership skills.
I think it's not too difficult, right?
I thought the training very dangerous. Can I go training? I die. Let me try go. I am a BMT. And you choose to leave me now?
我叫罗宝。罗文。I'm on your 罗宝。
Recruitment, hurry up! Recruitment, hurry up! Whatever you hear, Sergeant, please listen. Get out of office.
Getting funny.
Wait! Catch Jack News' latest movie. Coming to a cinema near you.
Recover!
That's Our Boys to Men. Okay, since we're fresh off watching it, okay, round of applause there for Jack. Well done, Jack. So Our Boys to Men is one of the, actually is the, I mean, the series, the sequel 1 and 2 are both combined the biggest box office hit in Singapore, right? So it's obviously successful. But, you know, with every successful film, there are challenges. And this is the topic of this conversation today. We're just talking about the challenges that all these successful filmmakers face in making a movie. So I'm going to just start with you, Jack. Just really, just if you can, just what we'll do is that we'll start about the gestation, like the starting of the project, right? So initially when you thought about the project, you thought about what you've done before in the past and the successful hits that you've had before, the idea behind it and the challenges that you face in making this movie. Obviously I see it is full of visual effects, you know, getting the army to do all the things that we all wish they could do for us, but you've managed to do it, you know, do that. You know, obviously that's a challenge in itself. Like, could you tell us more about what are your most prominent challenges, you know, in making this movie?
Well, I think most of the Singapore movie, basically, you know, we got the budget around like 1 mil Sing dollars. So this movie, obviously we need to have a bigger budget. So when I told the investor, I say I need about 3 mil to do one movie. They were like, no, definitely no way, because 3 mil for to recover just in Singapore market is ridiculous. So they say that unless you make it into 2, then this is why we have episode 1 and episode 2, and within the 3 million, and we have to squeeze all the budget, you know, to make a lot of CG scenes. And in fact, there's one of the scenes that we need to actually block all the route in the central area of Singapore. And I think that is the hardest time for us, because we were only given like 24 hours to bring the weapons, the tank, the soldiers into the Singapore, the financial area, and that is a very sensitive area, and we were only given the 24 hours. You have to bring the debris and all the thing in, and we have to quickly, after the shoot, we have to quickly bring up everything and run. And we have to clear and ensure that the floor is not damaged, because we did the explosion in the road, and it was very dangerous. And he said that make sure you don't make all the glasses crack, you know. So these are all the, I think, the challenge. Yeah. So to work with the Singapore Armed Forces actually is also quite a miracle, because this time they say that it's because of the celebration of year 45 for the national service in Singapore. So they say that we will let you do from your perspective, and we will not censor your script. So to all the filmmakers, I think this is a miracle. So I think these are the bigger challenges, and yeah, finally we made it. Thanks. That's
great, Jack. You know, so we're just going to go an overview of challenges, and then we're just going to go back to specific challenges. I mean, we could look at financing, we could look at casting, we could look at distribution, and you know, we'll go through that after we've kind of gone through everyone's sort of like films and overall perspective. So we're going to head over to you now, Banjong. Okay. So we're going to play I believe your most recent movie that you've made, right? And so we're going to have a look at what Banjong has just made more recently here.
Tôiรู้เปล่าตอนเขาไปรบอ่ะเขาคิดถึงแต่ตัวเองอ่ะ
มึงไหวมากมึงไหววะ
เขาคิดถึงเลยครับย่า
แล้วตื่นคนไปไหนหมดวะทำไมตลาดมันวายเร็วจังวะ
นี่มึงยังไม่รู้จริงๆใช่ไหมไอ้บ้าว่าอีนาคมันเป็น
แม่กูเดินป่าเป้าไก่มากเรื่องอีนาคอ่ะอีนาคมันก็เลยเอาถึงตายอีอ้อเป็นผีกูเห็นอกมันดูอ่อนมันเป็นผีจริงด้วยพูดอะไรของมึงวะฮะเอ็นอีอะไรใครจะฟังออกอีนอก
เป็นอะไรเหรอจ๊ะ
รีบไปเก็บของแล้วเพลงเถอะเร็วๆแล้วจะปล่อยให้มาอยู่กับผีจริงๆเหรอวะแล้วต้องหาวิธีบอกความจริงไอ้มากวะ
เล่นไล่คำกันใช่ไหม
เนาะข้างข่าวเสื้อหน้าไม่ใช่เมียผีเสื้อถูกไอชิมันตอบผิดใช่ไหมเต๋อใช่ไอชิทำผิดว่ะจะผิดได้ยังไงวะก็นี่เสื้อนี่ผี
จะรีบไปไหนกันล่ะจ๊ะพี่ฉันยังไม่ได้ใบ้เลยฉันก็แค่อยากจะอยู่กับคนที่ฉันรักพวกพี่ไม่ยุ่งอะไรด้วย
อย่างนี้เขาไม่เรียกว่ารักหรอกเขาเรียกว่าเห็นแก่ตัวมึงอย่าไปยุ่งกับกู
แม่กูเคยบอกว่าถ้าอยากรู้ว่าใครเป็นผีให้ลองมองลอดหลังขา
ไอ้มากหลบไปดิอะไรของมึงวะโอ้ยชินหลบไปเอาด้วยเหรอมึงหลบด้วยไปไหนมึงหลบขวาเอาหลบก็หลบเอาไอ้เผือกคนเดียวเหรอ
Yeah, round of applause for that. That's P Mark. So Banjong, P Mark was incredibly successful. I mean, it just went beyond Thailand. It did, and you know, it was. I guess the comedy was just so physical that I think a lot of people just understood it. And I think between you and Jack, you both have coined this phrase "homedy," right? You know, horror comedy. I think you've both done horror comedy. I think you share a lot of affinity there. But Banjong, again, tell me, you've done an incredible amount of successful films, right, in this genre. And tell us just really coming from that success and going into a film like P Mark, it's horror comedy. What are your immediate challenges for you?
ก็ตามการท้าทายที่ใจนั้นที่ว่าเป็นการท้าทายที่เป็นหลักปัญหา
I will answer in Thai and he's gonna help me. Okay. ก็จริงๆทำหนังแต่ละเรื่องเนี่ยความยากของผมอย่างเดียวคือผมอยากจะเปลี่ยนไปเรื่อยๆนะฮะคือเรา
Okay, the difficult part is that I have to change a lot of times.
If I did something right, people will tell me that you're gonna keep doing it, do the sequel or something like that. But for me, I have to find a story which attracts me first, and I have to find something new in it. Yeah, it's my challenge.
Right.
I don't want to do the same thing again and again.
No, it definitely looks different. It's definitely different from some of the other work that you've done. But you've taken a lot of those success models and applied it to something different, and it works, right? But obviously there have been challenges, like I can imagine production, on location, all kinds of things like that. And we're going to get to that as well. I want to find out about how challenges you face as a successful filmmaker in financing your next movies in terms of what people ask, right? I'm sure that Jack gets that as well. I really feel we're like United Nations. It's like, you know, two translators here and, you know, everyone's speaking in different languages. But I hope the audience, I hope you can actually hear what everyone is saying. But if you don't, you know, we could always answer questions later, okay? So just on to Maya, okay? Hi, Maya, you look incredibly nervous, right? Don't be. You know, we have a very friendly audience here. So Maya, so before I sort of like get to you, right, I just want to play a trailer of your most recent production coming from Indonesia. And so can we have Maya's trailer, please? That's the first time I've seen that trailer. I got, goosebumps already. We all know The Raid is such a successful, movie, and this is the first time I'm seeing the sequel to it. Look, just tell us about, just in a nutshell, about coming off of Raid, getting into Raid 2. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. So the Raid 2 is basically the story after what happened in the Raid, and it's discovering the world outside that building. So you're gonna meet a bunch of other more cool, awesome villains who can really kick ass. In terms of challenges that we faced on the Raid 2, what happened in the Raid 1, everything was contained in a building. So obviously there are certain things that you limit to what you do and what you do not do because of the set, because of the location, the set, and the storyline. So on the second one, we really wanted to explore what we didn't do on the first one, because obviously with every production that we do, we also would like to learn from a lot of our mistakes and challenges and whatnot that we will definitely learn the lessons from. On the second one, particularly, we really challenged ourselves on locations and logistics because we brought in a Hong Kong car stunt team to Indonesia to do car chase scene and car stunt scenes, and that means we brought a bunch of equipment from Hong Kong to Indonesia, which wasn't very easy, but we done it. So nothing's easy until you said it's done. So we done it. So it's definitely doable, guys. Don't disregard the idea. Also, in terms of locations, we shot a lot of things outdoors this time compared to the first one. We went outside Jakarta. The particular location that we faced a big challenge and that we accomplished it was this area called Gombong. Actually, Mbak Shanti shot a movie there before, so I did get a lot of advice from her, thank you. So we shot in this prison cell area. This is actually an old Dutch building dating back to 19th century. So it is actually a touristic spot as well. But the location really supported us and gave us a permit so that we can shoot there 2 weeks with no public access for other people. But this building is almost the size of a football field. And with the Indonesia climate, the sun going up and down very quickly, controlling the camera temperature was very difficult. So we had to make our own butterfly that can cover a football pitch size kind of thing. So logistic-wise and technically-wise, it was quite a challenge, but we did it. But it's looked really, it's really good, and we're really proud of it. And hopefully everybody is looking forward to the film when it's released in 2014.
Definitely, we all are. I mean, I think after watching the first, the Raid, everyone has known the Raid and its franchise moving forward. Its complexity of action, right? And the way that the film has accomplished that in such tight time frames and budget is an amazing feat by itself. That in itself is a huge challenge, not to mention everything else that you have to deal with. I mean, I filmed in Indonesia, and obviously Indonesia is filled with challenges, but I think it's really good that you're able to produce something that I feel globally it's so travelable, right? That it's a great pride for Indonesia. So that's fantastic. So we're going to go back to more specific challenges, but I want to take the opportunity right now to introduce to you, to the audience, to Mr. Kim Min-ki, who's the CEO of Fineworks. And before we have a brief overview, we're going to have a trailer here.
하나 남았어. 아저씨, 가방 샀어요?
셀러문. 셀러문. 야, 왜 그래?
이용구 1961년 1월 18일 태어났어요. 경기도 이천 제왕절개. 엄마 봤어요. 내 머리 컸어.
감히 내 나와버리란가.
김냄새 떨어졌으니까 승희는 뭐 해야지? 뭐 필요한 거 있어?
예승이 형.
아빠, 왜 여기 있어? 아빠 나쁜 사람 아니잖아.
나쁜 사람 아니야.
여기는 학교야, 학교.
학교 아니야. 여기 감옥. 다 나쁜 사람들. 아빠 나쁜 짓 안 했어.
미안해, 서른이니까 지금한 내가 37이요. 당장 삼촌 6시가 제일 좋아해요.
글 모르는 놈이 그 사람이에요?
싫어 간다, 싫어.
미안해. 소연이 사귀는
아빠가 셀럽 사줄게 나가서.
그거 아니었으면 병풍 뒤에서 향냄새 맡을 뻔했어요.
정씨, 공판자가 잡혔어요. 네? 힘이 아니에요. 선거 공판이에요. 이번에 마지막. 네? 잘 가네요.
네, 잘해요.
당신이 죽어야 당신 딸 예승이가 산다고 뭔 말인지 알지?
피고인 이용구는 살해 전날 자신을 때린 경찰청장에게 복수하기 위해 그의 딸 최지영 양을 유괴한 사실이 있죠. 벽돌로 내려친 사실이 있죠. 벽돌로 내려친 사실이 있죠.
네, 있어요.
피고인 이용구에게 1심과 동일한 사형을 부여하는 바입니다.
저기 재판장님, 수사기관에 한 인간을 두고 그에 맞는 상황과 처지를 고려하지 않고 범죄를 인증할 수 있느냐 없느냐에만 맞춰 무리한 수사를 진행하였습니다. 법의 기본 원칙인 무죄추정의 원칙을 저버린 겁니다. 피고인이 정신 지체라는 점과 딸을 사랑하는 피고인의 마음을 악용하여 모든 상황을 포기할 수밖에 없도록 만든 겁니다.
Great round of applause. This miracle in cell number 7. Mr. Kim, maybe you'd like to say a few words about the movie, but I think you have also a colleague here as well, the director of cell number 7, Mr. Lee, who is here with us in the audience. So, Mr. Lee, maybe you could stand up and say hello to everybody. All right? Okay.
감독님 잠깐 한 말씀 드리겠다.
So Mr. Lee has a few words to comment.
여러분들 만나 뵙게 돼서 반갑습니다. 이 7번 방의 선물 감독한 감독 이환경이고요. 여러분 앞날에 행운이 있길 바라겠습니다. 감사합니다.
I'm very happy to see you all today. I wish everyone will enjoy this time and continue to prosper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. So maybe just a quick roundup from Mr. Kim about the, again, this movie, incredibly successful. You've done a lot of movies here before. Yeah, what was the overall challenge in making a movie like Miracle in Cell Number 7?
먼저 이렇게 만나 뵈서 너무 반갑고요.
First of all, it's an honor to see you all today.
제일 힘들었던 것은 그 천재지변입니다. 태풍이 2번을 몰아쳐서
The biggest challenge that he faced was twice thunderstorm during this production.
최근에 필리핀에 몰아친 쓰나미처럼 첫 번째 태풍이 와가지고 다시 겨우 복구를 했는데 촬영하기 또 직전에 또 한 번 태풍이 와서 세트를 다 무너뜨렸습니다.
So in the first section, there was like a tsunami scale big natural disaster at the time. So even if they set up the entire setting, because of this natural disaster, they had to do it again. So this really triggered a lot of delay and a lot of sorting out things afterwards.
여기 계신 분들 다 말 들어보니까 역시 투자자는 항상 제작자 대 적인 것 같습니다.
Yeah, he really feels that investors are true enemy of producers.
설득과 설득 끝에 다시 세트를 세워서 영화를 완성했습니다. 그게 제일 힘들었습니다.
Despite these natural disasters, he was able to succeed after so many trials of conviction and convincing all the investors after all. So that's why this movie is here today.
Great, thank you very much. You talked about the investors being the ultimate enemy to producers. That's a really interesting concept, right? And I think sometimes we feel it, but we can't act it, right? We always got to be nice. But investors' money financing. You know, we have a film, it's all about having to finance it and produce it. Ultimately, you know, all of you guys here are successful producers in your own right. You've done a lot of box office hits. You're making your next movie, and like Jack mentioned, you know, there's always challenges. No one's going to give you a blank check, right? So when you're raising finance for your next movie, right, what are the questions that you get asked? What are the main questions that you get asked by investors?
한국에서 1,300만이라는 관객들이 영화를 봤고요. 엄청나게 많은 수익을 벌어들였습니다. 그래서 다음 영화는 투자를 안 받고 직접 할 겁니다.
Okay, he's really confident in his producing movies because this movie, Miracle in the Number 7 Cell, this hit the biggest jackpot. Basically, it drew 13 million people in Korea. So in the history of movie records, it was the big success. Therefore, this time he doesn't need investors' money. He will do it by himself.
A round of applause for that. That is.
만약 투자자가 투자하기를 원한다면 제가 서류 심사를 받아서 적격한 투자자를 제가 고를 겁니다.
Now he will go through a selection process if there's any investor wants to join him.
I love that. We should do that here. Okay. Okay. Let's just have the same question to each and every one of you, right? So, Maya, what about your thoughts? You know, you came off of Raid 1, which is incredibly successful. You know, you're just about to go into the second one. What were the immediate questions that you had in terms of financing for that film?
How much more return of investment, or how much quicker can we get it back? Usually is the common question. And also, Indonesian box office had a little problem quite recent years because we had, you know, importing movie and things like that, and it sort of dropped the number of audience going to the cinema, so that naturally it affected the numbers of audience going to watch local films as well. And then when The Raid came out, there were movie like Negeri Tiga Menara and things like that, which came out before the raid. Those films and a few other films before started to pick up the number of the audience, and then the raid came out, and then after that, a few other films came out and then hit the box office for that year. So it was really good, and it was showing a promise for the Indonesian industry. So naturally, our investor sees that too. So when can we hit that kind of number? But obviously, all of this comes with slow process and things like that. But I'm going to discuss a little bit on the side of the sponsor side. On the sponsor side, we did get approached by a few sponsors when we were starting on the raid 2. And as much as we love having sponsors, because as producers, we don't have to give any money back, right? But we have to be very selective towards what kind of sponsors that we decide to pick, because ultimately, in Indonesia, we tend to have brands and companies that really would like to have a hard sell kind of product placement, which sometimes doesn't really work with the storyline or the kind of movie that we're trying to sell. So those are the kind of things that we faced at the beginning, and then we just have to be careful with the type of sponsors and what kind of product placement that we can promise them. But having that kind of sponsors obviously helps us with the financing, because those are the funds that you don't have to return. So.
Right. We're definitely seeing a lot more sponsorship getting involved, or sort of like subtle brand placements in films happening more often. I think that's gone sort of like a new alternative level of financing, which is, I guess, is a challenge always to package together, because there's always commitments when you're talking about sponsorship, right? But just, I'm going to throw this question back to Banjong, right? In terms of, the Thai box office, to my understanding, is quite dynamic, right? I mean, there's a lot of films being made in Thailand, and there's been a lot of great films, and Thai horror has really excelled globally as well. It's really been an exported sort of like phenomenon coming from Thailand. And so now coming into PMARC, how did you, what were your immediate challenges in putting together a film on the financing side? Was it easy for you to raise financing based on the success of the movies that you had before?
Personally, I only work with my film studio, GTH. So all I have to do is just telling my idea to the producer. That's all. Very easy for me.
Right. So from Korea and Thailand, they actually control the investors, right? At least I know that. Okay. How about you, Jack?
Same thing, actually. Usually we will let the producer know that what kind of script they want, what to do, and then I think they will calculate the cost, and of course we will try to look for sponsor, and the sponsor can actually help us a lot.
Right.
Yeah, Singapore is a small market, and if let's say we want to go for a bigger production, it's actually quite hard. And this is why I have to make the film into sequel 1 and sequel 2. And this is to try to break even all the investment.
Right.
So we hope that one day, we can actually collaborate with more country, and we can do also our own version of like action film. So we have not tried action film before in Singapore because of the small market. And action film, we need a lot of money.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Well, all of you are successful filmmakers, and ultimately, as you get more credits to your name, I guess the raising of finance becomes less of an issue, because you have more alternatives, including sponsorship and and different investors. But now, I mean, a lot of these films that we see here today are incredibly successful outside of our home territories, right? I mean, all these movies have found a marketplace outside. When you're making your next movie, are you, what are you thinking about? Are you just thinking about how it works domestically as well as internationally? How does international success influence you, right? Maybe Banjong first. How does what the audience have reacted to your movies outside influence your next movie today, right?
จริงๆต้องบอกว่าเวลาทุกครั้งที่ผมทำหนังผมไม่เคยคิดถึงตลาดต่างประเทศเลยฮะคิดแค่ local อย่างเดียวเลย
Actually, when I think about my film, I then think about what are the influence outside that were have any impact on my film. But domestically, what are the impact for my film?
Our thing is to communicate with the local people, and that's all. I don't think of international market at all.
At all. So it's completely localized to a certain extent. And
maybe my next film is different because it's going to be a Chinese film.
Right. Okay. Okay. Is that with you, Jack, as well? I mean, you know, Singapore is, again, it's a very small market, right?
They are very lucky, you know. They only think for the own country, and the market is big. And in fact, I think for us, for me, you know, I also think of our main market is still Singapore. But of course, now we have to consider, like, can other country understand the story? Yeah, this is why in my next film, we are going a bit to action film, because I think action film is easier to communicate. You know, either you talk about ghosts internationally, everybody understand, or action film. Yeah, so these are a few genres that we can choose. So I think for me, if you want the world to really understand Singapore story, you know, in a commercial way, and I think you have to go for like an action film, or horror film, yeah, and maybe love story. But love story doesn't work in Singapore.
Well, again, it's harder to travel culturally, right? Because it's so ingrained in our own sort of like, you know, our own cultural elements. But going back to yourself, Maya, Raid was a phenomenon worldwide, okay? Even though it was in Bahasa Indonesia, you know, it reached an American audience, a European audience, it translated all over the world, and I believe there's a remake as well that's is ongoing right now. Moving into the sequel, it's in Bahasa, right, the sequel, is it?
In the Raid 2, we have majorities Bahasa, but we have a few scenes executed fully in Japanese, because we have 3 Japanese cast in the sequel as some of the supporting roles. And going back to the Indonesian market and the international market, ever since we started Merantau Films and started with our debut film called Merantau, which is also known as Merantau Warrior, we've always seen international market as our market that we have to, you know, expose the films to, because we also believe that action genre is something that actually can travel without language understanding. For those action movie lovers, sometimes they don't even have to understand what's going on. They just want to see the pure action going on. And even on Merantau, we have an international cut and Indonesian cut. Indonesian cut has about 20 minutes additional footage where it actually shows a lot more of the tradition of Merantau, because the film is based on Western Sumatra Silat Kortaigel Sirat. And so on Merantau, we managed to attract the attention of the international distributors, and we distributed to North America and Europe and other South Asian countries as well. And then on the Raid, then what we learned from Merantau, and maybe not repeat on the Raid, was maybe not to make the story too localized, because Merantau did really well locally. It also did well on internationally, but maybe the drama side and the long drama side ended up making us have to cut the 20 minutes to make an international version, which to us, you know, obviously we wanted to show the longer version, but to the international audience, for selling an action film, it shouldn't have to wait 15, 20 minutes to see the first actions to start. So then, okay, in terms of cost as well, then we don't have to make 2 masters in terms of producer side. So we said, okay, let's just do one version. We go straight into action. We're selling a hardcore action film. That's what we're gonna do. So that's how the idea of the Raid came up. And the storyline is very simple. It's about going in and either you get killed or you kill them. So it's very to the point. And then it appeals to the international audience as well. And then on the second one, involving an international cast, involving a foreign cast like the Japanese cast is also our next step. And also, we also brought in Joe Trapanese, who did the music composing for the Raid Redemption, with Mike Shinoda for the North American version. And bringing in, you know, foreign talents like this also obviously will contribute to adding more international exposure. So we've always seen international market as something that we always want to target.
Yeah, certainly with a successful franchise like The Raid, I mean, you certainly would not be challenged in finding individuals around the world who'd want to participate and work with you on that, because, you know, ultimately, you know, it is, I would call that a center of excellence in what this genre is, you know, and so, you know, looking at The Raid 2, you find that there's just so many more collaborations on an international level than the first project, right? And I think that would probably be, you know, your sort of like move forward, right? You'll continue to kind of expand that and work more with sort of like collaborators. And I think we're going to talk about that in a second. We're going to talk about collaborations moving forward, whether you guys would consider collaborating. You just mentioned, Banjong, that you're going to be doing a Chinese movie, right? But just let me go back to Mr. Kim here. You know, Japan was your largest market, was it? Or what? So did I get that wrong? It was a big success in Japan, right? The film. Was I correct in hearing that? Which is the biggest market in which Miracle in Cell Number 7 had outside of Korea?
이 영화가 인기가 제일 좋았던 데는 중국이고요.
The biggest hit country was China.
불행하게도 그 수익하고는 아무 상관없이 아마 중국에 있는 전 국민들이 다 본 것 같습니다.
So even if it was so successful in China, there's no revenue out of it. So you know what that means.
슬퍼서 울고 있습니다.
So the revenue is somewhere in China, right? But it's just not extracted out of China right now, right? Okay. But will that influence you? Okay, that might make you consider making films in China in the future, right? But you know, looking forward for the future, right? Let's talk about collaborations. Would you consider collaborating or making a movie outside of Korea with another co-production partner? Would you consider that?
예, 이미 그 감독님한테 중국에서 엄청나게 많은 제의가 지금 들어와 있는 상태고, 뭐 거의 지난 2주 전에도 감독님 초청해서 중국에 갔다 왔고, 그래서 어떤 작품을 해야 될지 지금 굉장히 난감한 상태예요.
Actually, there was a lot of love calls from China. So after this vast majority of audience who watched this movie in China, there's a lot of people who come to Mr. Lee, Director Lee, to work together, to collaborate together, to produce movie in China. So actually they're quite debating whether they need to select which one to work with. So it's actually an ongoing process, and they're going through some process where who we can collaborate with.
Okay. At least you have the opportunity now to look at potential candidates. But you know, maybe on the subject of China, Banjong, you're making a Chinese movie, right? Could you tell us more about that collaboration moving forward?
Yeah, Stephen Chow, he saw my episode in my previous films, Phobia 1 and Phobia 2, and he liked it. So we talk about making another horror comedy for the Chinese market. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna, before we move on to the Q&A session, because we're kind of getting on time, I'm gonna just ask one question to everyone, and we'll take you know, some time to answer that. If you had to do it again, right? If you had to do this again, what would you change in your experience? I mean, you've already had a successful movie. Potentially, you've learned that it could have been better, and you know, it could be commercially better, creatively. But you know, which aspects would you definitely change again if you had the chance of time travel?
Let them answer first.
Okay, but okay. Well, no, I mean, it could be anything. It could be just one. Okay, Maya, what would you change? Could be,
Can
you
I
know,
say
anything.
something that I wish?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Coming from a producer side, making an action film, I really would like to make a very secure and stable environment for my crew to work and the cast to work. Not just accidents, but in many, many ways. I'm not just talking about air and emission insurance. I'm talking about basic physical insurance and so on. Because in Indonesia, insurance for project and also just the health insurance to cover the project is non-existent, especially if it's a film. If it's maybe a property development and thing, it may, it's there. But for a movie, especially the moment you mention the word action, they back up. Because I've gone, since we made Merantau, I've gone through at least 3 different insurance companies asking if they would cater to this special insurance. Because, once it's there, a lot of producers are really seeking out for this kind of policy. And it does help the mentality for the crew and the cast and all of us, and it make us producers sleep better at night, So insurance definitely one thing for the security reasons, and it would also maybe a lot of other things like when we have to make a lot of the legal documents like copyright report, title reports, and so on. When we have to deliver to the international distributors, we don't have I haven't found any Southeast Asian-based company that we can actually get and then provide to the international distributors.
You mean the deliverables, right? Is that what it is? Yes.
A list of a huge deliverables.
That's a nightmare, yeah.
It's one of the nightmares that a lot of producers have to go through when we deal with distributors. Especially the bigger the distributors are, the more lists that you will have. Like the go-to vendors that we already know or something. And usually we get pointed by the distributor which one they want, and in the end we don't have a choice, and that comes to the budget as well. Same document can cost double if you go to a different vendor and things like that. So I think that kind of different channels, if we have a different platform, I think it would have been
Okay. Well, it's probably a long list, so, but I think if you have anything interesting to sort of like impart, I mean, I definitely, with the kind of movie that you've just done, right, insurance is key, right? Myself, I experienced an accident on one of my movies, and if we didn't insure it, it would have been really disastrous for us, right? And it was a challenge in Indonesia to look at that kind of level of insurance. Mr. Kim, how about you? If you had to do it all over again, aside from maybe think about how to extract revenues from China, how would you do it again? What are the things that you learned from that you would have done differently in the last movie?
감독님이 앞에 계시기 때문에 이 영화는 완벽한 영화입니다.
Well, first of all, because I am facing my director Lee, Mr. Lee, this movie is perfect.
그래서 그 이야기는 따로 감독님 안 계실 때 하고요.
So he's going to share what he can do if he actually produces this movie once again.
왜냐하면 다음 작품도 같이 해야 되기 때문에.
Because he's going to work with Mr. Lee again, so I need to make sure that I buy his good opinion.
굳이 이야기를 한다면
If I have to say something about it, if I produce everything once more, then I would say
이 영화에 그 상상력이 들어가는 부분이 굉장히 많이 있었는데 그런 부분들이 제작비가 없는 관계로 표현하는 데 굉장히 좀 부족한 부분이 있어서 만약 다시 만든다 그러면 이 영화 속에 상상력을 좀 더 줄 수 있는 퀄리티를 좀 높일 수 있는 부분을 좀 더 강조하고 싶습니다.
For this movie, there are a lot of elements that require imagination. The reason why they could not really express more expressly is because lack of budget. So if he can do it once more, then he will put more emphasis on how he can express this imagination part. That will be giving you more visual effect at the end.
Okay. Banjong, how about yourself? If you had to do anything again?
When I look back into my old works, I can always see the mistakes, so many mistakes. Now, if I watch Shutter, my first film, I want to kill myself actually. But I think it's the best I can do at that time, so I'm not going to change anything.
Okay, all right. And Jack, what about you?
Well, if you ask me, our boys to me, if I got a chance to redo it again, seriously, many people say that I should make it a war movie. And of course, due to the money constraint, we are unable. But if I can actually do more war scene, and I think it is something that's going to be, it's easy to go and travel internationally.
I think that's for your next movie, right? Okay, we're going to go to some questions, okay? We have some questions posted up from the audience. I think some of those questions are for everyone. Some of them are very specific to some of you. Let me just, I think you could all participate here and just answer whatever you guys want. But, you know, one of the questions here, and I could read that, in your opinion, what are the key factors that makes the project such a hit, right? I mean, what you know, do you guys have a take on that? Anyone? What's that one key factor do you think that makes your project a hit?
If it's for me, A Boys to Men, basically, Singapore, you know, every family has to go through national service, and all the parents actually very concerned about what their son doing in the army camp. So actually, I'm allowed to go in and to the actual location to shoot, and I think this created the curiosity of them, and this is why they watch and support the movie.
Okay. Okay.
The idea, the big idea, has to be simple and fresh, something fresh. Yeah, and the cast has to be right with that character.
Okay. Mara?
For Indonesian audience, I think it was an action movie genre was absent since the late 80s, and then when Merantau came out, when we made it in 2009, I think it was a bit of a breath of fresh air, perhaps, because the genre hasn't been there for a long time, and we particularly represented an Indonesian culture-based movie as well, and then same with The Raid, it's the genre of action which has been absent. And then with The Raid, we had, you know, some international hype before the film was released in Indonesia, so that's definitely helped the popularity when it really the local release.
Okay. Mr. Kim?
그 제일 중요한 요소는 그 소통이라고 생각합니다. 감독과의 소통. 그래서 그 영화는 감독의 예술이고요. 그 시나리오가 좀 나쁘더라도 감독의 역량이 얼마나 뛰어난다고 영화가 달라질 수 있기 때문에 어떤 무엇보다도 그 감독은 아버지고요. 그다음에 프로듀서는 어머니이기 때문에 매일매일 끊임없이 그 아이디어라든지 영화에 대한 어떤 그 정체성이라든지 그다음에 그런 부분들에 대한 어떤 그 절정이라든지 이런 부분들에 대한 생각들을 감독과 끊임없이 사색하고 이야기하고 대화하고 소통하는 게 제일 중요하다고 생각합니다.
So his view is that the most important person in the movie production is actually the director, because director is the father of the movie and producer is the mother of the movie. So in order to have a best movie, there should be a constant communication between the director and the producer. So with this kind of best communication ongoing, you can really make your project such a big hit. That's based on his experience.
Great, great. And we have one more general question before I have two very specific questions. How does piracy in Asia affect your movie release strategy in Asia, right? And so does anyone have an opinion on that?
I'm gonna go first. When The Raid was released, we released it in US and Indonesia simultaneously at the end of March 2012 back then. And we had a very strong 3 weeks. And then when we hit 4th week, the piracy version came out online. The drop on the sales report the next day from the local cinema dropped 60%. That was overnight.
660.
Wow. This is an overnight. And naturally, that's a huge loss to the theater, to us, and to the TV license that we already also sold. So that's a massive, massive drop. On Merantau, we didn't feel that sort of drop because during Merantau movie was out, piracy, Indonesian piracy, pirated DVD, didn't quite produce local film pirated version. When The Raid came out, foreign film, local film, they treat it the same. So we also had that. But the online version came out straight away, and that really killed our income.
Right. Okay.
So naturally, then, for the next one, I think a lot of the other territories we would like to release it as almost at the same time, so that. But it's also there's a benefit to it because then we can all piggyback each other's marketing values together and that release it together. But also it's to fight the piracy.
Right.
I think it's the biggest problem in Thailand too, and in Asia. But for Pima, maybe it's the exception because people want to see it in the cinema with a lot of people because it's a comedy. People will get to laugh together. So the piracy is not that big problem for only this film.
And for us, the bigger problem is that after we release the DVD and all the DVD go online, and I think that affected the DVD sales. But basically, our box office sales is not so bad because before that they can't get any copy, so they only get a pirated copy after the DVD release.
It's Mr. Kim.
이건 개인이 고민해서 해결될 문제가 아니고요. 국가와 국가 간에 그리고 저작권을 관리하는 전 세계 어떤 기구에서 좀 더 강력하게 아마 대처를 해줘야 될 부분이 아닌가 생각합니다.
Mr. Kim believes that this piracy is not just an individual problem, it's actually a very structural problem. Therefore, there should be a policy or government support to make sure that each director and producer, they will get protection on their IP right. So this cannot be just an individual's effort to remove piracy in Asia.
Yes, correct. I mean, it's all about enforcement of the laws, and in many emerging markets, enforcement is very lacking, sometimes. So that's unfortunate. Two more questions. One very specific to yourself, Banjong. We have one question here. Let me read it out. In most of the Thai movies, we'll definitely see a comedy element. Without the comedy, do you think Thai movies will still do well at the box office? And if yes, do you have some examples to share?
There are many films that not comedy that is successful in the Thai box office, such as King Naresuan. It's like an epic drama, something like that, or some love story, something like that. Yeah. Not only comedy can be successful in Thailand, but comedy, it helps.
Okay. All right. We have one more question. Okay. And that's going to be to Maya. All right. Let me read that out. The Raid was a very violent martial arts film. Do you think it's because of the fighting scenes in the movie that contributes to the success in the US?
Yes, it's quite a bloody movie, but I'm not particularly sure about that it contributes to the success in the U.S., but I'm gonna discuss this more in a global way. I hope that's okay. I think when we look at action movies, these days we see a lot of effects and CGIs being put up into it, where maybe the audience, when they watch the film, they lose the sense of reality. When we made Merantau and The Raid, Gareth specifically want to create these scenes that is actually doable. If you can fight, you can do martial art, you can actually replicate it. It's all possible stuff. So it's not an overdone kick, it's not an overdone punch, it's all relevant, and it's the pain and sensations that you can associate as you're watching it. So it's not kind of overblown the scene by adding a lot of CGI, but it's presenting what is natural the best way possible for the audience to be able to relate, so that whatever the actor, whatever the scene is being represented is really transparent to the audience. Particularly on The Raid, Gareth wanted to make a film that's like a visual roller coaster. So you don't even have time to eat your popcorn in the cinema. And so we're not focusing on the violent side of it, but it's more about the thrill side of it, that you can relate to it as you're watching the film. And maybe that sort of visual communication with the audience contribute to the success where people actually relate to it straight away. Thank you.
Great, great. You know, I think, thank you. First of all, I want to just thank you for all your time, our dear panelists, for being here. I think the nature of this panel is really the sense that, you know, behind every successful filmmaker, there are always challenges, right? I mean, making movies is all about overcoming the challenges, both creatively, logistically, and I think without those challenges, then maybe all of us will be making movies, right? So, you know, successful movie makers in their own right, but incredibly challenging environment making those movies, but looking to the future in terms of, you know, distributing those movies. We're looking at piracy. I think piracy is going to be an issue that we all have to face moving forward, and hopefully that will change. And also the nature of how we earn revenues through box office and how it goes into video on demand and internet and all that. So these are challenges moving ahead. But that being said, you know, I think we'll wrap it up here, because I know I have some time left here, but we have been up here for a while, and I'd like to let our panelists go. And if they have any time, if you like to have any time with them outside of this session, please feel free. But ladies and gentlemen, please give our panelists a round of applause for participating.